Hi friends and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, hello. My name's George Agenbar and I'm a UK music producer. Today's video is about sitting your vocals in a mix. This is something that many engineers, musicians and home producers struggle with. This video aims to give you a strategy to approach the difficult vocal. We'll cover how to listen for problems and ways we can correct them. We won't be covering vocal doubles or thickening, as they've already been covered in a video in this series, and we'll do a separate video all about harmonisation later on. So if you're struggling with these problems, make sure you stay tuned and hit the subscribe button and notification bell, and remember to look out for new videos every Wednesday.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name since you kissed me in the rain.
The main vocal is usually the most important part of the song. It's the element that people tend to remember the most. The main vocal needs to be loud enough, clear enough and intelligible, while still sounding as though it gels perfectly with the instrumentation. No two songs are the same, and so there's no sets of plugins or processing that will produce the perfect mix every time. The most important element of getting our mixes right is to use our ears and have a system for spotting what's right or what's wrong with our mixes. So sit down with a notepad and pen and listen to the mix a few times. Work through a checklist of items as you do so. Think about the technical aspects. Is the recording a good enough one? Is there any clipping or a noisy background? If there are any technical issues, how are these likely to be affected by any processing we would want to apply? For example, will adding compression make a noisy background even worse? Think about the arrangement. Does the vocal and performance suit the instrumentation? An aggressive arrangement and soft vocal may never go together. Even if we turn the volume of the vocal up, the characteristics and timbre may never achieve what's really needed for the song. And along the same lines, does the vocal suit the style of music? Or is there a mismatch that processing won't be able to fix? Listen for any volume issues. Is the vocal too loud? Is it too quiet? Or does it need emphasising in certain places? And listen for EQ problems. Is the instrumentation competing for vocal space or causing any muddiness or harshness to the vocal tone? The artist may have supplied us with a demo track of a live version or simplified version of the song. This can be really useful to give us a feel for the energy or delivery that they intended. Likewise, the artist may have given us reference tracks, and this is really useful to see how they imagine the final track turning out. So by this point, we should have a list of potential problems to address. The key is now to think carefully about how to do this. There are hundreds of tips, tricks, plugins and advice out there, and in a way we should be reassured by this. It implies firstly that there's no one solution, and secondly that this is difficult and a common problem. Now please bear with me if you've gotten this far in the video. We are going to talk about the processing, but in a way that's the easy bit. First, let's talk about a few housekeeping rules that will benefit us greatly if we follow them. Remember, the vocal is the most important part in most songs. Build the mix around it. Don't leave it right to the end as an afterthought. I've seen top engineers do this. Mix quiet, or better still, mix very quiet. It's not as much fun, I know, but if the vocal's still intelligible when the mix is quiet, it's an indication that we're in the right kind of place. Remember to reference your mix on multiple different speakers. In the studio, we use flat response monitors, but in the real world, nearly everything is bass enhanced or lacking bass. It's a challenge. And remember, when checking in mono, the vocal tends to become louder in the overall mix. Remember to keep going back and listening to your mix and listening to the effect that each change has made. Don't be tempted to apply a whole lot of processing to the vocals in isolation, as we'll never know which change was the one that worked. Each mix is different. I said at the beginning of the video that we would be concentrating on how to sit vocals in a mix, rather than strengthening a thin vocal with doubles or harmonies. So that being the case, the tools and techniques required are relatively simple, and boil down to sorting out the volume, adding compression, creating room with EQ, and using effects to allow us to visualize the space that the vocal is in. So let's dig in with some examples along the way. If the overall volume of a vocal is too low in a mix, then we can solve this by simply increasing the fader throughout. However, it's often the case that we need to be a little more subtle and make small adjustments only where necessary. And this can be done old school, via a desk or using a MIDI controller. Don't try and do it all in one go. Use multiple passes and create a cheat sheet to let you know what's coming. The old school volume automation is one way of doing it, which will write the automation for us. But my preferred way is to do this in the DAW, as it's the easiest and most precise. Its disadvantage is that it's a bit slower, but it's used by many engineers. I like to focus on the quieter parts of the track and make that sit in the mix. This is because I'd rather turn down the louder parts than turn up the quiet parts to reduce the chance of increasing the noise floor. So I find a part I want to turn down, select it using the marquee tool like so, and simply drag down the yellow line. Let's have a listen to the track without volume automation.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name since you kissed me in the rain.
And now with volume automation.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name since you kissed me in the rain.
You can hear the volume automation makes the track sit better in the mix just because it's a whole lot more consistent. If only the choruses need turning up, then they can be moved onto a separate track and the fader of the chorus track can be turned up separately. This also means that we can apply separate processing on just the chorus of the vocals. Volume automation is a very powerful tool in getting our vocals to sit properly in the mix. It doesn't change the quality or colour of the vocals, unlike the next tool in our armoury. Compression brings down the extremes of volume in our track to make them closer in volume to our lows. It lends consistency to a track, but it can also add colour and character. It's not a substitute for volume automation. I've made a video all about vocal compression that you can go and check out, and I'll leave a link to it in the description. I'm compressing the vocal with a few dBs at a ratio of 4:1. Let's see how that sounds.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name since you kissed me in the rain. And things will never be the same when I hear your name since you kissed me in the rain. And every little...
We can use serial compression to achieve a more consistent sound and add different colours to the vocal. Here's the same vocal with 2 compressors.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name since you kissed me in the rain. And every little...
If the mix is competing with the vocals, I like to use sidechain compression to duck the level of the mix when the vocal is playing. I simply group the mix together and apply a compressor across it. I then set the main vocal as the input for the compressor. This now means that when the vocals play, the compressor will turn down the volume of the mix slightly and create space for the vocal. This is how the mix and vocals sound without the compressor.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name since you kissed me in the rain. And every little...
And now with the compressor.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name since you kissed me in the rain. And every little part of my being...
You can hear that the compressor turning down the mix slightly makes the vocals really shine through and work with the mix. So compression and volume automation cover the dynamic element of sitting vocals in a mix. Don't ignore them and don't underestimate them. Next, we're going to look at creating space for the vocals in a mix. To make our vocals sit well in a mix, we need to make sure that there's room for them. If they don't have this space, then they'll be competing with other instruments instead of complementing them. And that's why it's so important for us to carve out a frequency pocket for our vocals. It can be hard to tell when frequencies are competing with each other, But when they are, we tend to get a muddiness or a lack of clarity, or perhaps even a brittleness or a harshness in our mix. And if you do hear this, have a think about which other instruments sit in that frequency range. Then have a play around with the frequencies in those instruments and see what works for your mix. Again, no two mixes are the same. Listening to this mix, you can hear that the synth and the vocals are in very similar frequency ranges.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain.
So I'm going to create a pocket for the vocal to sit in by cutting out a part of the synth's mid-range. This is the mix without the EQ change.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain.
And this is with.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain. And every little part of my...
And now you can hear that the vocals sit a lot more happily in the mix, and the sound of the synth hasn't been affected that much. If you are EQing out a certain area of an instrument to carve a space for your vocal, please bear in mind that you may need to increase the volume of this instrument, as this EQ cut will decrease the instrument's volume. Next up, let's have a look at creating an audible volume or space for your vocal to sit in. The vocal needs to sit in the world that the mix inhabits. Professionally recorded vocals are often completely dry and give us no auditory information about the environment. Adding effects allows us to decide the space and the feel we want the vocals to develop. Delays, reverbs and distortions provide us with a playground to be creative. In general, delays tend to bring a vocal forwards in the mix, reverbs tend to push a vocal back in the mix, and distortions tend to warm up the sound of the vocal a bit. We can use different effects in different parts of the songs. Delay is something that has been an absolute lifesaver to some of my mixes. I've found that adding a delay to a vocal can almost instantly help it sit better in the mix. Delays tend to have the opposite effect to a reverb and bring the vocal forwards without separating it completely from the mix. And we tend to keep delay times relatively short to make sure that the vocals stay intelligible. I like to use a stereo slapback delay on my vocals, as I find this makes the vocals not only sit nicely in the mix, but helps strengthen and thicken them. To create a stereo slapback delay, we need to use different delay times on the left and right channels. This means that we will hear the delayed vocal at different times in each speaker. If I wanted to make my vocals stand out even more, I would put the delay time slightly out of sync with the track's tempo, but only by a small amount. I don't want to make this delay time too long, as this can muddy up my mix and make the vocals hard to understand. So here's the track without delay.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain. And every little part.
And here it is with.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain. And every little part.
You can hear immediately what a difference this effect makes and how easily it sits the vocal in the mix. Next, we're going to talk about one of the most widely used vocal effects that really give us an impression of physical space, the reverb effects. Reverbs are essentially multiple delays with varying duration, coupled with differing amounts of feedback. This tricks our ears into imagining the space that the reverb suggests. I'll make a video all about reverb later on in the series. We can use pre-delay to make sure that our vocals sit in the right place in the mix. The pre-delay determines how long before we hear the reverberations of the sound. The longer the pre-delay, the more present the vocals sound. This can help prevent our vocals becoming difficult to understand. Here's the vocals with a short pre-delay.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain.
And here's a longer pre-delay.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain.
You can hear that the longer pre-delay sounded clearer because of the space in between the original sound and the reflection. You can also choose which frequencies of the vocal you want the reverb to affect, which is also known as the Abbey Road reverb technique. By narrowing this range of frequencies, you can also get the vocals to sit better in the mix, as it helps create space in the lower mids. So here's the track without any reverb on the vocals.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain, and every little part of my...
And here it is with the reverb.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain, and every little part of my...
You can hear the vocals do sound as if they've been pushed back in the mix slightly, but they no longer stick out and sound dry. So endless possibilities. Don't be tempted to use the same reverb over and over again on all your mixes. An intimate acoustic track and a death metal track are going to need different effects. The final effect I wanted to talk about is distortion. When you hear the word distortion, your mind might go straight to rock guitars. However, there's so much more to it than that. Distortion is when we reshape the wave. We actually distort it. And when we do this to a vocal, it can help colour our vocal, make it sound warm and full, and really help our vocals sit in the mix. I like to use the Overdrive plugin to add distortion to my vocals. Overdrive is a type of distortion, however is a lot more subtle and doesn't change the tone of the sound as much. Distortion gives us a harsh, gritty, in-your-face sound, whereas overdrive gives us a warmer, less intense saturation, perfect for vocals. The plugin is really easy to use. We just have to set the output level, and as this track has been mixed so that all the peaks reach minus 18 dBs, I'm going to set an output of minus 18 decibels. Then we can choose the tone. This sets the frequency of the high cut filter of the plugin. When I use this plugin, I turn the tone up fully to 20 kHz because I don't want to lose any high frequencies in my vocals. We can then play around with the amount of drive we want on our track. The more drive, the more distorted the track will sound. So here's the track without overdrive.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain.
And here it is with.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain.
The overdrive is only slightly noticeable, and you wouldn't necessarily notice it if you weren't listening for it. But it has really rounded out our vocals and made them sound more full. And this makes the vocals sound as though they are sitting in the mix better and not sitting on top of the mix uncomfortably. I think there are two main lessons to take away today. The first is learning to listen critically, and the second is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Just to wrap up, I wanted to play you the mix with the main vocal with no processing on.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain. And every little part of my beat apart, can't help but fall apart. And everything you say makes me feel this way. Wanna know if you're the same. You don't care at all, now I feel so small, but I just can't help but fall. I'm a fool for you.
And now here is the mix with the main vocal with all of our processing.
And things will never be the same when I hear your name, since you kissed me in the rain. And every little part of my beat apart, can't help but fall apart. And everything you say makes me feel this way. Wanna know if you're the same. You don't care at all, now I feel so small, but I just can't help but fall. I'm a fool for you.
As you can hear, the vocal now sits a lot more happily in the mix, and we have a better song. Getting a vocal to sit in the mix isn't all about expensive plugins and having a great singer, although I'm sure that helps. Getting a vocal to sit right is what truly distinguishes a great engineer and a great producer. Don't be discouraged though. Practice makes perfect, and having a system will vastly improve us all. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you found it useful and helpful. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, and if there are any other videos you'd like to see in the future. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and remember to look out for new videos every Wednesday, and I will see you again soon.